We've just finished making a working confirm dialog, and now this is a fully operational dialog and we can move forward. But I figured while we were here, why not just slightly enhance this and give it things like a bit of feedback. So if we've got a long running task and we want to show some information, or what if something fails? Say we want to try to delete and it fails, we don't really want to close the dialog to have to open it again. So let's just add a few extra enhancements to this. I think one of the things I want to do here is firstly allow the caller to set the width. Just because when we start to add custom strings where the user can enter some information, say an error message, we don't want this expanding and contracting. We'll see that happen as we make this, I'm sure, because once the text is large, you'll see it expand. But for now, let's just put a width in here and we'll just bind to it. So we'll do a binding and we'll make something called dialog width. And then we'll need to add that to the confirm dialog view model. So we'll just go in here, an observable property, private double, and call it dialog width. Now, in order to ignore, you can't do 0 because that would make it literally a 0 width element. But if you do double dot not a number, then this will convert to the equivalent of it not being set. So it won't affect the dialog. So if we just test that, we've got a default value, so you can see it's not changing width. And if we change this to say 800 and compile, we should see this grow. So there we go. So we've now got control of the width, but by default, if we do this, then it's like it's not been set. So it's up to the caller then if they want to mess with the width or allow it to just grow and shrink as it needs to. I don't think we'll bother with the height for now. That will just grow with the content. I don't think there's really a time we want to set the height, but we can always go back and add it. Next, we want some status text. So say we just want to mention something or something's gone wrong and you click yes and it fails to delete. We want to show a message potentially saying something like that. So I think just above the buttons we'll go. So in between here, the buttons and the description, we'll just add another text block. And we'll do the text bound to something called, say, status text. We'll do the same again. We'll come in here and just add some status text. And we'll just put, for now, just to quickly test the UI, then we'll delete it. Something went wrong. Please try again. That's a fairly standard message. When we compile, we should see that. There you go, you can see that error message. If we set the width a minute to, say, 600. You can see I think that wants to be close to the buttons, so we'll do text alignment right. We'll want some color, so dynamic resource and some alert. There we go, that's looking a bit nicer. And I think we want it closer to the button, so it's obvious it's kind of related to the button press. So we'll just move the margin down a bit. Bit more, maybe. Yeah, that margin's not doing what I want it to. And that's because we've got spacing set in the stack panel. So is that not allowing us to... I don't think that's allowing us to move outside of the stack panel spacing. So we might just have to, because I want a bit more control of this, just remove that. There we go. And then we'll just set the margin on this one specifically. Maybe, to be honest, now a 10 on the top and bottom. There we go, that's nicer now. We obviously want to make sure this can wrap as well, in case we limit the width and then it becomes too long. Next up, we'd want some progress text. So while things are happening, we can kind of show some text. We don't want to reuse this status text because this wants to maybe stay here while the dialog's open. But while it's running, we want to maybe hide these buttons and show some text instead. We'll leave this alert in place here, but we'll just get rid of the text so it doesn't show unless it's set. And we'll change that back to not a number for now. So as well as status text, we'll have progress text. And we'll do something like processing. And then I think we want the process text to replace these buttons, which means we want the buttons to disappear when we are effectively busy, which we haven't really done any concept to yet. But when we click a button, we want to delay and wait. And while the dialog's busy, we can then use that to hide these buttons and show the other text. I'll put the other text down here. I'm just going to copy and paste this one. It's going to be very similar. This will be progress text, which I'll have to compile to show. So like that, processing. We don't want the extra padding, I don't think, but then again, it also needs to pad to about the same size as the buttons, so we'll leave that in and it'll probably end up about right. And we don't want it being this bright, I don't think, for the processing. So we'll try just like an active gradient. A little bit dark. Active gradient text. There we go, so like a subtle colour. We might want to brighten that up, but I think that's about right for me. And then the buttons will want to be invisible when we're busy. So is visible. If we did false, you can see we'd see this while it's doing something, and then it'd reappear, and the opposite would happen here. This wants to be hidden when we're not busy. So for that, we will need a observable property, private boolean, and it'll be called busy, which is false for now. And now we combine this to binding busy, and we want this to be visible when we're not busy, but we want the progress text to only be visible when we are busy. So that should toggle the two states, so they get shown, and then once we click and set this busy state, the other text will show. Let's just run and make sure nothing's broke first. I know we haven't really done any changes yet other than view model. Now we go to here. Oh, looks like we left that long delay in. That was in the main view. Change that to 0. We must have left that in the last video and not changed it back. There we go. So it's still working. Open. Yes. Close. So all the remaining work now is going to be in this view model. What we want to do is when we click confirm, we want the ability to run some asynchronous task and then await for it to complete. And during that point, whatever called it can do anything it likes with the view model. So the UI can update, and then we close. So the first thing we'll do is change this to an async task. We'll call it confirm async. And now what we can do is we can set busy to true. And we could even say if busy, then return. But this should be handled automatically by the fact relay commands can have a can execute. And if we await a task on the confirm, it will automatically set the can execute to false and disable the button. So this shouldn't be needed, but we'll leave him in as a double check. So we set the busy to true, and for now I'm just going to set the status text automatically to say processing and delete that there. So even if the caller doesn't set any status text, we at least set the default so it says something even if the caller doesn't change it. And actually that's not the status text, is it? That is the progress text. We will, however, set the status text, which is effectively the static text above that is sort of a final result if something's gone wrong. We will clear that off. So every time we click the button, it's cleared off for us, and the caller doesn't have to reset it each time. Now here is where we want to await something from the caller, but for now let's just do it without that. We'll just do, say, a task.delay of 2 seconds, and we will then say change the progress text to this is taking a while, wait another 2 seconds, and then we're finished. After that we can set busy to false, so we're no longer busy, and then everything else carries on. So all we've done here is set a busy flag, cleared some text, set some text, and delayed in between, and then ended. So let's see what that's done for us so far. Go to actions, delete, click yes. You can see it's hid the buttons. This then gives us a nice little update, and then when it's finished, it closes. That's pretty much what we want. No just closes. Yes does something, processes, does this action, which is what we now want to set off. So all we need to do is move this text here, this fake kind of, this is doing something, off to the caller, so the actual caller of the confirm dialog can do something. To do that, we'll just make a function delegate. So we'll go, say here, do a public function. So this can be injected and set up at the time. You'll see how to use this. We'll pass the dialog, so the actual view model itself that can be used. Then we'll have a task, and we will want to return true or false because we want to know whether to close the dialog or not after the button's been clicked. So if they click confirm and something goes wrong, we want to allow the caller to return false so that we can then not close. And we'll call this, well, it wants to call it onConfirm, so I guess that's probably the right name anyway. We'll call this onConfirm. It's a getter setter, and we'll set a default value. We don't want it to be nullable, we want to just always set it. And we'll just do a task.fromResult. We'll just basically return a nothingness. And that should be true, so it's always successful. And then what's it complaining about now? Oh, yeah, it helps if we do it right. We don't need the view model. And that isn't equals, if I get the syntax right. So this is effectively the view model, but because we don't need it, we're using this discard. So this could be like VM, and then here we can access the view model to check things like updating status. But for the default call, we don't care, so we just discard. This onConfirm now, we can call instead of doing this. And because it's a function, it can be set by the caller, and the function is going to return a task. So that means we can literally await the onConfirm. And it will also return a result. So we'll do var result, and you can see there, await confirm. It's going to expect us to pass in this confirm dialog. So we'll pass in ourselves. And then after that, now we can do something with the result. So we'll set it to not busy because we're done. And after that, what we'll say is if the result was false, so if not result, just return. Don't do anything. Don't actually close the dialog because we've decided that the caller has a problem and doesn't want us to close. Because we've got a default task, this should still work. It's just that nothing should happen. It should just basically say processing and close. But again, let's just check we still have that working. And we go delete, click yes, and then it's gone as quick as you can see. So you haven't really seen it say processing. It's just kind of appeared and disappeared, but that's still working. So now if we go to the action page view, let's try and actually consume this new ability. We've got the title and message set already, but now all we want to do is we can say confirm, onConfirm, there we go. onConfirm equals, and now we can just do an async, because we want to await it. We'll have the view model. Then we can break out like this. This is now going to pass in the view model, which is effectively this. It's just an easy way then to access this variable inside of this call. And we can do whatever we like with it. So if we just paste this in for now, what we had before, it's expecting us to return, so we're going to return false, so it doesn't close. And progress text now becomes the vm.progress text from this passed in view model. So this should now work as we had it before, but we've now moved the logic away from the dialog and into the caller, so we can nice and easily do custom code when we call something. And if we've done the logic right, when it returns false, it should also not close. Let's give that a go. Open. Yes, there we go. Processing. Taking a while, and then it should stay open, which it does. If we just keep these buttons visible as well, because you might not want to, I mean, I'm personally going to hide the buttons, but say you didn't want to hide these buttons, let's have a look at what's happening with the buttons. And this shows off a good demonstration of the relay command. Because by default, the relay command, as I mentioned, if it has a command that's an awaitable task, while it's running, it should disable the button. And there you go. So we can't click the button twice. You can see, however, the no's clickable, which doesn't make sense. So let's fix that just in case you want to keep the buttons visible. And the way we do that is in the confirm dialog. This cancel the relay command. We need to tell it, because this isn't awaitable. We can make it async, so it knows it's awaitable in a sense. But now we need to tell it, even though this task isn't going to be called and awaited, something else will set its can execute. To do that, we simply open up here, type can execute, and now we can set this to a string of the method. So it needs to be a method that's going to return true or false as to whether it can execute. So because this is logically in here, run, and it sets itself up, we're going to use the busy task here, this busy flag. Because all we do is when we call this, we instantly set busy. And then when we're finished, we set that it isn't busy. That will mean we can have the can execute linked to the busy, but this is a property here, and it needs to be a method, and it also needs to be the opposite, because can execute means you can click the button, whereas if it's busy as true, it's the opposite, you want to not call it. So to solve that, we just make a public property, and we'll just call it is busy, or rather not busy, because it's the inverse, and that is going to be not busy. Now we can link that to not busy here, like that. But instead of doing that, we can do name of not busy, just in case we rename the method. And this will now listen out, well, it won't actually listen out yet, it will link it to the not busy call, but we also finally need to fire an event change for can execute, so that it knows when to reevaluate this method call. And similar to the notify on property change thing we did, we can do it here. So we used to do notify property changed for, like that, to notify another property when this property changes. What we can also do, as you see, notify can execute changed for. So it does the same thing. When this gets changed, we'll tell anyone that's got a can execute listening out to reevaluate. So whenever this value changes, we want to reevaluate the can execute of this method, so the cancel command. So if we do cancel command, and again, it's actually the name of, because it's expecting a string, it will now tell it to reevaluate the cancel command's status of whether we can execute every time this changes, and then it's going to call into this to see whether it can, and that's going to link us in with the busy status. That means as soon as we change the busy here to true, this is going to fire off the can execute. The can execute is then going to ask for this method to be executed, which we'll call this, which will then finally pull this back in. So we're still linking now, and the no button should ultimately be disabled. So click actions, delete, yes. And there we go. Both buttons are now disabled until we're done. But because we are using, or hiding the buttons rather, we won't see that, but at least now it's got the logic in there that will work. The only other thing we haven't really shown off there is we're not setting any status up. So we're setting some progress up that does things, but we haven't actually set any status. And we also want to see what happens with long text as well. So what we'll do is in here, we'll do another delay. And we'll do it, we'll just repeat this over and over a few times. Let's just have a look at what happens if there's a really long message. Click that, click yes. And this is where you'll obviously, I presume, see this dialog grow, because there you go. So this growth is what you might not want to see. And if you don't want to see that, what you can do is set, say here, that new property we had for dialog width. So we set the dialog width to 500. It'll fix the width now. And the only thing that'll happen is the dialog will grow in height, which is a bit less jarring than the dialog growing in width. There you go, that's a bit more pleasant to see. And I guess you could also set the maximum height of the status text and put it in a scroll bar and all kinds of things. But I'm not going to bother for now, you get the idea. But what I think I will do, let's just chuck a height in there for the sake, just for completeness. I said we wouldn't do it, but you might as well. It's just more flexibility for the caller then. And it's that easy as just making an extra property. And now I guess if we wanted on the call, we could go down, set the dialog height, and this is based on your application then. We could say we know our message is never going to be over a certain length. And then when they open the dialog, that doesn't look right, we want to float it to the bottom, but let's ignore that and see if the dialog won't grow because it all fits in. There you go, so that would make it where the dialog wouldn't change size. It doesn't need to be anywhere near that big, so probably 300. Let's just now go and fix this alignment as well. So let's just do a min height for the minute so I can force this larger. And we want to align these buttons to the bottom, which is not possible in a stack panel. So this needs to change to a grid. It needs to have column definitions, or rather row definitions in this case. We'll have auto for the description, auto for the status text. Then we want to fill for the buttons and auto for the last one. Do then grid.row is 0. Grid.row is 1. Grid.row is 2. And grid.row is 3. Ah, that's not worked. What have I done wrong there? Is that because it's in a border? Yeah, so this isn't growing. Or why is it not growing though? Maybe we don't need... Has grid got padding? Nope. Got margin. We can use a margin in the grid and get rid of the border, I guess. See if that helps. And then this is because the grid's inside of another stack panel, which is a similar issue. So the top level now needs to be a grid. Row definitions, auto and fill. Grid.row 0, grid.row 1 should then grow. There we go. That's now going to fill. And the final step will be vertical alignment bottom. There we go. Hide the grid line now. Now it's all working. And that's the new UI. So let's just run that one. Oh, let's get rid of min height. Well, min height doesn't matter too much, but we'll remove it for now. Are you sure? Yes. Processing stays there. Text will fit above. There we go. And then it ends. So that's a way now you can have a nice dialog that won't oversize. As mentioned, if you kind of wanted to fix this more, you could limit the size of this control, so the amount of text that can be shown. You could have it in a scroll view, which isn't very practical because it's just whizzing by. So I'd probably just limit the text here. Or you could just let the text box grow. It's really up to you. The flexibility is all built into this control now. So with that done, we will delete the dialog height, leave it at that. And we won't bother doing the extra step. And what we will do though is set the viewModel.status text. So we can say, oh no, something went wrong. And this should then set the text when it's finished and stays open, because we've obviously set the viewModel's status. So we now look at that, click here, click yes. And you can see this is preventing us from clicking behind. And then there you go. Oh no, something went wrong, and it's kind of in your face, and you've got an option to click no to close, or you could just click yes to try again. So this is now a nice asynchronous dialog, if you will. We can click and do stuff. And then obviously this would be true logic. So this would be, accessing a database call and trying to do something, and when we're happy with it, we can return true. So if we return true there and push this in, what will happen now is you'll see the status messages, and then it should close because it's been successful. There we go. So I think that's now all we want. You can see this on screen. So if you need this, this is obviously what happens. I might just for now comment this out like this so you can see how it works until we make use of this in the application, because otherwise I'm just going to delete this. It doesn't exist and you might not remember how to do this. And I think that's as far as we'll take the dialog now until we need to do something else. It's usable for what we need, and we're at the point where we really want to start probably committing to a database now.